Hello, friends. Good morning. I hope all of you must have done your examination quite well. And this is the question analysis of English literature paper, which happened on 14th of December. And you can expect the exam in next 10 days' time. The results might be, available. And if you, at the very outset, I'll tell you the one important thing. In fact, I found this exam was the easiest NET exam in the last 3 to 4 years. Yeah, it was the easiest question paper. And based on the way we prepared, right, as we emphasized on the famous terminologies and authors and names and ages, if you look at, those who studied in the last batch and previous batch, they all know that very easily you could have done most of the questions. Yeah. So let's look at some of these questions which we were able to remember, including I2, around 55 to 65 questions would be there. So based on that, let's look at how we could have done these questions. Yeah. So let's look at analysis of some of these questions. So as you know that there was a question on NEP, National Education Policy 2020. Specifically, there was a question on language, okay, the role of language. And if you know the basic, I think about educational policy, we studied in even paper one. Based on that, very easily you could have done that question on language. As far as literary criticism is concerned, there was a question on Simone de Beauvoir, the match the following, all, critical theories, those who the thinkers, those who wrote in 1940s, 50s, and 60s, match the following. And if you go through the critical theories, very easily you could have done all those questions. There was same way a match the following question on D.H. Lawrence novel. Yeah, all the novels, 4 novels of D.H. Lawrence. I remember Rainbow, Women in Love, etc. were there. What you have to remember is the date, the year of publication. Yeah, same way there was a question on the novel which does not deal with transgender issues. Yeah, if I remember that there were novels which dealing with diaspora issues, they were which dealing with the terrorism. So with that elimination, very easily you could have eliminated. I remember novels like the Reluctant Fundamentalist. Novel was like that, a novel on by Pakistani and Afghanistani writer. So very easily you could have arrived at these novels. They don't they don't do deal with transgender issues. There was a question on Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shri, yeah, last year's Booker Prize winner, right? There is a shot in our video also in YouTube channel. You can watch it. Very easily you could have done that question. There was a question on feminist criticism, basic core principles of feminism. And when we discussed in detail, very easily you could have done. Same way post-feminism, who coined the phrase and what are its aspect? That aspect, there was a question. The term bricolage, right? Bricolage was coined by Levi-Strauss, and later Derrida also does not agree with, the concept, right? About the question was on bricolage, right? By structuralist and how Derrida responded as a post-structuralist. There was a question on movies and, movies and their, the novels, okay, including novels of Chetan Bhagat, like Three Mistakes of My Life and, Q&A by Vikas Swarup, which was made as a that famous Oscar award winning movie, Macbeth. Yeah, Shakespeare's Macbeth was adapted for Hindi movie, Makbul. And, if you go through it with general knowledge about these, adaptations, very easily you could have done. There was a match the following by Amitav Ghos's Ghost novel, right? If you remember the title, very easily you could have done, right? And there was a question for culture studies, subculture, the meaning of, the style. This work was written by whom? Yeah, if you look at the very founding principle, yeah, the 4 important thinkers of culture studies, yeah, very easily you could have done selected the answer. There was a question on pidgin, okay, and language, okay, on aspect of that. There was a question on Sassoon's langu and language, okay, langu and language and parole aspect, the basic question of structural linguistic, which we discussed in detail in our class. There was a basic general question on homonyms. Yeah, homo means same, nyms means, meaning, same meaning, words. Gugi Thong was decolonizing the mind. There was a question on decolonizing the mind as a post-colonial, criticism. We talked about, Gugi Thongwa, how we gave up writing, in English language and went back to Guyuki language, how it says that decolonizing the mind is the first thing, this African people or readers or the writers they need. There was a question on neo-colonialism. Yeah, colonialism, but in 20th century after Second World War, how neo-colonialism has taken over, concept of that. Okay, there was a point about post-colonial theory also. When we discussed in detail, very easily you could have understood the question and we could have done that. The basic question, when this book, the landmark book on post-colonial theory, The Empire Writes Back, was published, I think it was 1989, the very post-colonial theories, one of the landmark book which we talked about, and you'll find that in our study material also. There was a question on Doris Pinkerton's novel, Following the Rabbit-Proof Fence too. She wrote this Aboriginal novel about the issues of rabbit and, how in the name of rabbit fencing, during 1920s, how these Aboriginal people were subject to different, problems and, colonialism. Yeah. So that is the basic question on that. New historicism. Yeah, there was a question on the basic point of new historicism. So we studied in detail new historicist perspective, right? There was a typical question on novels and characters. Four important, Victorian novels where the novelists were there. Like, for example, Charles Dickens. I remember the title was From Dombey and Son, or Martin Chuzzlewit. Yeah, I've forgotten exactly. Right. There was a Thomas Hardy's. I think it was from Tess of the D'Iberville. The name of the character was there, and very easily you could have done the math the following, right? Concept and theories, again a critical theory question, right? The math the following concept, our terms and terminologies which you find in our YouTube channel, around 278 terms. Just memorizing them is enough. Panopticon, right? Jeremy Bentham introduced this term, and we know that Michel Foucault talked about this, in his, the prison, book, which he talks about how, the jails were created and how surveillance happens. Okay, so here, the basic meaning of panopticon was asked, and there was a question on some critical, thinkers, views on Author of Fire. There was a question on Apology for Poetry, a basic question on Philip Sidney's work, right? And a very simple question, when this poem of, Byron was published, okay? She Walks in Beauty, that was. And in the same way, a very basic poem like Red, Red Rose was written by whom? Yeah, Robert Burns. We all know that, right? Then Hymn to God the Father, A Valediction of Weeping, etc. All these were poems by whom? Yeah, we all know that metaphysical poet, John Donne. Right? Schizoanalysis, we know, yeah. Felix Guattari, yeah, who talks about this as a post-Freudian thinker, right? The very term is enough. Same way, Marxism and postmodernism, yeah, assessment and reasoning question, yeah, that was a very easy question. Same way, who coined this term, speculative fiction? Anthropocene, what is the meaning of Anthropocene? We all know that. What would be the meaning of Anthropocene? How human beings have, destroyed, and, how our influence on this whole environment, biosystem, right? Liberal humanism, concept and ideas of liberal humanism, yeah, which we talked about for a long time. The whole of Victorian neoclassical period, all was all about liberal humanism. Renaissance humanism on that, right? One of the aspect of Renaissance was humanism, yeah, giving man-centric, man was the center, man was, man became, because of his all those 5 to 6 senses, how man and human values and human, characteristic became the center, right? There was a general question on points about, about course in gender linguistic by Saussure, right? The structural linguistic, which was written around 1915. Okay. And there was same way, there was a basic question on Toni Morrison's beloved and Nadir Godimer's work, right? Analysis. Mary Wollstonecraft's work, they've given the works and asked you to do the math, the following, and find out who was the author. There was one question on slave narrative, some of the very slave narrative and their important works, I think, which we shared in our group also, right? The concept of defamiliarization, yeah, defamiliarization comes from Russian formalist, okay, Viktor Sholsky, we talks about that, and later it was used by Bertolt Brecht also when he talked about epic theater. Before that, defamiliarization comes from the alienation concept, which was introduced by Karl Marx, right? Thomas Carlyle's works, chronology. There was a question on that. Chronology met the following question. Yeah, very easily, you could have done that. Works on F.R. Lewis. Yeah, so that is stage one. You must have prepared some of the important works of, that is what I emphasize every time, right? The basic works of each author, right? There was one question on Sanskrit author and Indian writers. Okay, this might find a little bit difficult for South Indian writers. There were a lot of Hindi writers. Okay, personally, I don't like that, because they could ask any writer from India, those who write in, Indian, those who write in English language, those who translate, those who write, for example, Sashi Tharoor or, Arundhati Roy. But these writers, those who wrote only in Hindi, right? In that sense, the UGC should ask even question from Thiruvalur, yeah, or Bharati. Yeah. My question is, will the North Indian student, those who study in Hindi or any other language in North, will they be able to do that? So UGC should think about that. They should not ask such questions. They can ask such question if the writer is very famous, like Kalidas or Premchand, but not these minor novelists. Yeah, some of them may be popular, more famous in Hindi. Yeah, but it's a English literature question paper. So that was one. So there was two question on Hindi writers and their work, right? Booker Prize and International Man Booker Award criteria, the differences. Just watch our video. I told you our shorts. There are three videos on our, in our YouTube channel on Booker Prize and the winners and the difference between International Booker Prize and Booker Prize. Nobel Prize winner of 2021. We have provided you the complete list also. Some basic question on biography and lecturia. It was a very easy question. In fact, if you go through the core ideas of Coleridge, what he talks about, the nature of poetic creation, very easily we could have done, right? There was a reading comprehension, one of the easiest reading comprehension, Bacon's essay of studies. I hope everyone should get 5 out of 5. Got it? Same way, culture theories like E.P. Thompson's Making of Working Class, one of the landmark book, you'll find that the basic idea about that. Aphoria, the radiant concept, okay? The indecisive movement in deconstruction, right? Who coined and what is the core meaning of aphoria? That was the question. There was a line from Andrew Marvell's poem. Yeah, so it was very easy one, very easily you could have identified. Basic question on Harlem Renaissance. Yeah, Harlem Renaissance when it, developed in US around Chicago during 1920s and 30s. Okay, right? And opinion of Jean-Paul Sartre on Camus' Rebel, right? The existential work, right? And there was a basic question on epistemology and ontology, right? We discussed in detail, all these concepts in our deconstruction, post-structuralism, structuralism, in fact, okay? We talked about how epistemology as epistemologists like, Immanuel Kant, and we talked about ontologists like Plato, and how their ideas were challenged by the great thinkers like Sigmund Freud or Marx, and others, right? And there was a non-fiction book by these, people. You can see L.K. Advani, Ranjan Gogoi, and the two more other writers. They were Gogoi was the Supreme Court. He was a judge, and L.K. Advani was a leader, right? So there was a question on that. Okay, it's a kind of a GK question, we can say. Negritude, the term negritude and its meaning, right? And how it developed in 1920s, yeah, when Afro-Americans, they started there, fighting for race, race as a culture issue and equality. And there was a question on vindication of rights of man, yeah, which was, written by, Mary Wollstonecraft, okay, around 1790s. So there was a basic question on that. And there was another question, written, who wrote this novel, The Last Man? Yeah, I think it was written by Mary Shelley. Options, if you look at very easily, you could have done that also. And there was another question on, basic question on Virginia Woolf's Room of One's Own, right? When we talked about, feminist literary criticism as a phase, as a, period, yeah, around 1920s, we talked about Virginia Woolf's core ideas, yeah, and so these were some of the questions we could remember. Yeah, so I hope all of you must have done quite well. So keep your fingers crossed. All the best.